in the country, and I took my Bible and I threw it. And I said, never again, Lord. I don't even want to serve you no more. This is the kind of God you... I mean, I'm surprised God didn't kill me. I am very surprised.
He did push you down the cellar stairs.
He did? Yeah. So, yeah. So,
You know, I think we've all had those moments.
yeah.
What I think about when that happens, when the disciples said to Jesus, where will we go, Lord?
Yeah.
I mean, there's no turning back.
I know.
There's no turning back
Yeah.
from God.
Yeah. And you're right. And when those happen in my life, I tell you, it wasn't 3 minutes after that. I said, I know. I said, forgive me, Lord. You know, forgive me. I know better. I just I said, you knew my heart anyway, so I just let it out. You know?
My wife will vouch. One day I came home and I was sopping wet. And apparently I went up to Winstead to get something. I was just having an argument with God, and I really got angry with God. And it was pouring rain. All of a sudden, pop, boom, 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 boom. I had a flat tire. And I had to get out and change that. I mean, it was pouring like you wouldn't believe. And my attitude right then and there, I said, okay, Lord, you got my attention. You got my attention. You know, just be patient and knock it off. I'm going to cool you down. That's what I really felt he did.
Yep.
He cooled me down.
Yep. Yep. So be careful of self-exaltation. I have to be careful of that in ministry. In 1 Peter chapter 5, verse 3, see the warning to preachers here and pastors? 1 Peter 5, 3. Nor as being lords over those entrusted to you, but being an example to the flock. I have to be an example. I can't lord over you. I can't. Sometimes I'd like to. Sometimes I'll go home, I'll tell my wife, you know, so I like to take a breath and just shake them, you know? But I can't. And so, so be careful of self-exaltation. What happens if I'm not talking about, we know what happens to those in leadership, God's going to chasten, but what about the average member of a church? We can't be Diotrephes, we can't. Because the minute you start doing that, you know what's going to happen? Look at the Proverb 18. I tell you what's happening. If we all act like Diotrephes, I just thought of something in 18. You were in 18, right? Look at 18, verse 19. This is exactly what happens in the church body if everybody exalts themselves. A brother offended is harder to win than a strong city. And contentions are like the bars of a castle. That's what happens, right? If a pastor or a deacon or anybody has position in a church, if they become Diotrephes, all they're going to do is sow contention, and you're going to offend a brother, and once you've offended a brother, they are hard to win back. Aren't they? Oh yeah.
That's right.
They're very hard to win back. That's why we have to be careful. All right, the second sin we need to avoid that Diotrephes had is the sin of self-ambition. Self-ambition. Look at Genesis chapter 11. Genesis chapter 11, verse 4. Remember the Tower of Babel, or Babel, however you want to pronounce it? And they said, come, let us build ourselves a city and tower whose top is in the heavens. Watch this. Let us make a name for ourselves, lest we be scattered abroad over the face of the whole earth. Self-ambition. Their ambition was to build a tower to make their name great. I'm not going to go into this thing with the Tower of Babel, but that was the beginning of astrology, all the witchcraft, occult, all began there because they thought they could build themselves a tower into heaven, and all the secular humanistic philosophy could all be traced back to the Tower of Babel. But I won't get into that this morning. But it's all self-ambition. Be careful of self-ambition. It's a terrible sin. Look at 2 Samuel. In 2 Samuel, I want you to notice chapter 15. Here, Absalom, remember Absalom's treason against his dad? After this happened, Absalom provided himself with chariots and horses, 50 men to run before him. And now Absalom would rise early and stand beside the way to the gate. So it was whenever anyone who had a lawsuit came to the king for a decision, Absalom who would call him and say, "What city are you from?" And he would say, "Your servant is from such and such a tribe of Israel." Then Absalom would say to him, "Look, your case is good and right. There is no deputy to the king is to hear you." Moreover, Absalom would say, "Oh, watch this. Oh, that I were made judge in the land, and everyone who has any suit or cause would come to me. Then I would give him" what? Justice. You talk about self-ambition. What's he doing behind his dad's back? What's he doing?
He's sneaking the power away.
You got it. He's going behind dad's back and he's saying, "I want his position. My ambition is to get my dad's job."
It says he stole the hearts of all
And
men
he's-
in Israel.
Boy, be careful, because that can happen in the church. All right? It can happen. I have seen pastors where their associates have got behind their backs and come to me, I'll give the advice, do this, do that, all with one thing in mind: I want to be the next pastor. You know? Deacons, the same thing. They want the positions, and they'll do. As elders, we have to be careful. It can be very easy for Mike to say, "You know what, pastor doesn't do this. You know what? I think I can do a better job."
No thanks.
Huh?
No thanks.
No, I agree. You know what I say to people like that? You want my job? Come on up. I'll give it to you. I'll gladly sit down. I will gladly sit down and soak in the Word of God, and you deal with all the stuff during the week, and have to preach, and have to counsel, and have to. You can do it. Do you think you can do a better job? You're welcome to. This guy, you'll find, if you think you can do a better job, step up. I'll give it to you.
Not only that, but stay holy doing it.
Oh, man, I know. That's the hard part.
Well, the thing is, they're stepping into it unholy
Yeah.
from the beginning.
Yep. So be careful of ambition. Diotrephes was that type of guy. The temptation, when you look at Diotrephes, is to use a role in the Christian assembly as a means of self-gratification. That's the terrible thing here, this guy. He only used his position for self-gratification. He didn't care who he stomped on. He didn't care who he kicked out of the church, as long as he had the preeminence. The apostle here, notice in our text in verse 10, notice the apostle promised and warned that whenever he might visit that congregation, he would point out this guy. He would point him out. Point out that sinful behavior, assuming it continued. Maybe, as you look at the verse here, maybe he's thinking, therefore, if I come, I'll call to mind the deeds which he does, prating against us with malicious words. Maybe John's thinking, oh man, if I pray hard enough, or maybe when I get there, maybe the guy will change. But Diotrephes, specifically here, was charging John. We got to keep the context here. Diotrephes was charging John falsely to evaluate himself. Worse than that, he was not giving hospitality even to visiting brethren. Our verse says, good night. As Gaius was. See, Gaius was giving hospitality to each people out. Man, I don't know. Maybe Diotrephes was doing this because he felt threatened by Gaius. Maybe he felt threatened.
So in some ways, we can call him a legalist.
Yeah, we could. Yeah.
Because it was his way or the highway.
His way or the